signed my name on a clipboard that smelled like diesel and old coffee and stepped into Holloway's night air. The reefer units throbbed a steady low note from the trailer row. A choir of engines breathing out cold. Sodium lights painted the empty lot the color of old teeth. Inside, the fluorescent tubes hummed like a mouthful of bees. Harlow met me under the mezzanine office window. Neon vest. Clipboard. Her eyes had the flat shine of someone who sleeps in 5-minute slices. "Third shift simple," she said. "You keep lanes clear, you don't get cute with the doors, and you follow the rules." She handed me a laminate card. 6 lines, block font, laminated corners worn white. I read them twice. The words were short. The meaning felt longer. Marla drifted over with a pallet jack and a tired half-smile. "Don't let her tones scare you," Marla said. "Let the other thing do that." She winked without humor and jerked her chin toward Dock 3. The chain lay across that door like a necklace found at the bottom of a lake. Still, greasy. No truck backed in. No reason for a chain to look like it was resting and listening. The first hour bled out in barcode chirps and the rubber squeal of jacks. Cold climbed through my steel toes. The lights flickered in their rattly metal coffins. The PA coughed once and swallowed it. I worked aisle F, learning the rhythm of the space, how the echo in this oven-sized warehouse makes you think someone is walking parallel to you, 2 aisles over. I told myself it was just acoustics. At 10:57 p.m., I glanced at the clock-in screen near the break room door. Green square. Welcome. I fished in my pocket for the badge as a refrigerated breath from outside pushed under the dock doors and lifted the hair on my wrists. When I looked back, the screen was red. No message change, same font, just color, a red that made my mouth taste like pennies. Rule 1. If the punch clock goes red, do not come in. Wait in your car with the dome light on. Enter at 11:07. I already clocked in, I said, too low for anyone but me. The screen didn't care. My photo sat in the corner in grayscale, jaw slack with surprise from the day I took it. Harlow's boots clicked behind me on the glossed concrete. "You see it," she said. Not a question. It was green. It's red now. Go sit 10 minutes. Dome light. Don't look at the glass when you walk out. Because you'll see somebody you'll want to follow. Shy swallowed the argument, scratching my throat. The automatic doors hissed me out into a drizzle that wasn't falling anywhere else in town. I could smell wet cardboard and old lemons, the citrus cleaner they never rinse right. My sedan blinked at me from the corner of the lot under a sagging light. I sat, turned the dome light on, and let that buttery ceiling glow press the shadows to the windows. At 11:02, the PA inside the building whispered a test tone that leaked through the door seams and tickled my teeth. Footsteps crossed the lot. Not mine. Not anyone's, because the lot looked empty in every angle of the mirror. They tapped across the asphalt, slow and damp, and climbed the air as if there were stairs where there weren't. I fixed my eyes on the clock on my dash and watched seconds grow heavy. At 11:07, the engine noise from the reefers dropped half a step, like a choir hitting the same wrong note at once. I stood. The dome light made my face look like I'd been awake for a week. I didn't look at the glass as I walked in. The clock was green again. "Welcome back, Evan." I swiped. The turnstile let me through. The air inside tasted like battery metal. The high racks creaked like trees in a wind no one else felt. I rolled a pallet down F lane, scanning and stacking, letting the fluorescent buzz settle around my skull like a hat. Above me, something walked along the top of the racking. Metal on metal, a soft, wet sound like bare feet on an aluminum boat. I tilted the scanner to see a reflection. The aisle mirrors at the ends showed nothing but a long stripe of white light. The footsteps stopped when I looked, started again when I moved. When I parked the pallet and looked up straight on, there weren't feet. There was only a line of wet prints on the steel crossbeams, walking toward the ceiling. Continuity. Clock in log Holloway DC, 3rd shift, employee Hale Evan, 11:07 p.m. temp, 41 Fahrenheit. Trucks backed 0, dock 3 chain. Secured, visual. I didn't tell anyone. You don't open with crazy on your first night. I pushed the jack down the next lane and pretended I didn't hear water dripping from somewhere above, where nothing ever melts. I ended the hour with the laminate sweating in my palm and the realization that the rules were written by someone who'd heard those same wet steps and chosen to keep breathing. I put the card back in my pocket like it might warm me. It didn't. I worked until the PA cleared its throat, and I pretended the ceiling didn't have a direction it wanted me to go. I told myself I'd only follow it when it called my name. I kept my eyes on the last line of the pallet labels, all the way to 1 o'clock. The PA burped the hour in a bored monotone, and the break room door sighed open on spring hinges. The room hummed with a dying soda machine and the glow of a TV bolted high in the corner. Channel 7 weather in 480p bled blues and greens onto the waxed floor. Marla poured burnt coffee and slid a chipped mug toward me. We don't talk about the rules during break, we just keep them. She made a little cross over the remote like a joke she hadn't laughed at in 10 years. Tino bounced in with a bag of chips and that 20-year-old invincible look. Thin mustache. Tattoo that could have been a snake or a rope. He flopped into the chair across from me and kicked a boot at the table leg until it jittered. So Channel 7, huh? He grinned. What, the weather's gonna narc on us? Eat, Marla said without looking at him. He spooned instant noodles, slurped, rolled his eyes toward the TV. The meteorologist in an off-the-rack suit promised a high of 55 over a map that showed I-75 like a scar. The sound was low, the captions on. The metal edge of my chair bit into my thigh, grounding me in a room that smelled like microwave spaghetti and lemon disinfectant. The vending coil whined as someone punched B3. A Snickers hit the plexiglass and stuck. Marla's mouth tightened. She fished a quarter from her pocket, slid it to Tino. Don't hit it, she said. Why? Just don't. He fed the machine like it had teeth. The Snickers fell. We exhaled together. At 1:07 the weather cut to a map of Florida. Miami lit up with a storm swirl the size of a dinner plate. The chyron read, Hurricane Watch. I blinked. The caption still spelled out cities in Ohio. The man pointed at the Gulf and said the word Dayton. It didn't match his lips. Marla's hand was already on the remote, but she didn't touch it. Rule 5, we watch, we don't fix. She looked at me. Head count on paper. I pulled the legal pad from the magnet clip on the fridge door, wrote the date, the time, and our names. Head count 109, present, Marla, Diaz, Tino, Evan. I slid the pen to Tino. He grinned, signed with a jerky flourish that looked like he was laughing on the paper. On the TV, the weatherman swept his hand across the Gulf again. The mic pack on his belt wasn't there in the reflection behind him. I wasn't watching him though. I was watching the greasy reflection in the break room microwave door over Tino's shoulder. The glass was a slow mirror, a heartbeat behind. It showed Tino sitting, eating noodles, smiling. Then it caught up, and he was still. 1 beat, 2, 3. His reflection turned its head after he did. Half a second late, mouth lagging, then catching up like bad internet. See, he said, mouth full. Florida, Channel 7's drunk. Drink your coffee, Marla said. She never looked at the microwave. The muscles at her jaw jumped. Her fingertips tapped the table 4 times and stopped. It was almost counting. I put the legal pad back on the clip. I checked the names again. Head count 109, present Marla, Diaz, Tino, Diaz, Evan, Hale. The second Diaz wasn't a trick of my tired eyes. The pen had written Diaz twice, in different hands. Tino's loops and scratches had landed on her last name, like the pad couldn't hear his. The TV clicked back to local. I could see I-75 again. See the county lines I used to drive deliveries through. Tino slurped the last of the noodles and drummed the table with chopsticks. The fluorescent tubes in the break room ceiling flickered, and for one dumb moment, all I could think about was how many bugs were trapped inside them. "Don't worry," Tino said, nudging my boot with his. "I'll answer if the PA asks real nice." Marla's coffee mug paused halfway to her lips. "Don't," she said. The bottom of the mug trembled. A brown ring lapped over her knuckles. I stared at the pad one more time. 3 names, 2 surnames the same. Rule 5 didn't say what to do when the paper insisted on a wrong truth. It only said to finish your break and keep quiet. We finished. We kept quiet. But as we filed out, the microwave reflection lifted its eyes a fraction too late and smiled with Tino's teeth. A fraction too long. Continuity. 1 o'clock. Channel 7, WXC 7 on. Head count, 3 of 3. Coffee burnt. Microwave door reflects lag, 0.5 seconds. I threw the cup away and felt the little electric lick you get when you've rubbed a balloon. The air in the hall had a charge to it. In aisle D, the PA crackled without speaking. In dock row, a chain sighed against wood. The reefer breath outside deepened, like it had found a lower chest to pull from. I went back to work and tried not to think about how a thing that could change a name on paper probably had opinions about voices. The hour between 1:30 a.m. and 2:30 a.m. is a kind of private hell warehouses keep for themselves. The caffeine's not singing yet, the body heat has bled into the concrete, and the only things you hear are the scanner chirps and your own ankles complaining. I was halfway down aisle F, moving cases of cat litter, when the PA woke up. Evan. Just my name. No extension, no doc. The sound ran along the rafters and slid down the columns, soft as fleece. I kept my eyes on the label. 12 PK clay, 40 pounds. I beeped, lifted, stacked, tried to let that syllable fall on the floor and go flat. Evan, honey? The voice bent, warmer, familiar, the way honey bends light. I tasted wintergreen toothpaste and plastic spoon handles and felt my throat go small. Rule 2. After 2:17 a.m., do not answer, do not look up, keep moving. Count to 400. I thumbed the scanner and started counting. 1, 2, 3. The concrete pressed cold through my kneecaps. 4, 5, 6. The voice stopped using my name and started using the one no one else used when I was a kid and too thin and always cold. If you hear me, it said, tap the handle twice. 7, 8, 9. The blue forklift light drew a comet tail on the floor as it passed an intersection and kept going. Driver's silhouette a squared-off shadow behind plastic curtains. My hands wanted to be helpful. They twitched toward the jack like they might talk for me. Evan, sweetheart, your hands are chapped. I told you to keep lotion in your coat. The PA bled warmth into the buzz until both sounds married. 10, 11. I wanted to look up. Every animal part in me wanted to look up. I licked my lips and tasted dust. 13, 14, 15. The chain at dock 3 shivered, just enough to make the hook clink against the rail. The sound shot straight down my spine. 16, 17. The voice moved closer without getting louder, like a speaker tacked inside my mouth. I brought you your hat, it said, and it was a sentence that didn't belong to this building. 18, 19, 20. My wrist ached. I swapped hands. The fluorescent ballast above F12 sputtered. The light went dim then bright like a heartbeat catching. 21, 22. I heard shoes on the polished floor behind me, not boots. Shoes I knew the weight and pattern of. The steps stopped at my back. Turn around, it said, and take it. 23, 24, 25. I could see the shadow it would make if I looked. I could feel the exact height it would be against the pallet. 26, 27. The chain at dock 3 clinked again. 28, 29. The scanner chirped. 30. I didn't answer. I didn't look up. I counted. My breath went short and hard, and I could smell the building's breath. The plastic, the soap, the diesel thin and permanently in the air like a ghost of trucks that had idled here 10 years ago. At 398, the PA cleared its throat. At 399, the voice said, "Okay." At 400, it cut off so clean the silence made a popping noise. I let my eyes travel to the end of the aisle. A forklift crossed, blue light calm, tires squeaking a friendly squeak. I checked the dock line down the long, bleached corridor. Dock 3 was still chained, except the chain hung a half-inch lower and swung slow like a pendulum that had remembered it was supposed to move. I walked toward it before I knew what I was doing. Marla materialized from aisle E and planted a hand in the center of my chest, so flat I could feel the lines of her fingerprints through my vest. "Don't," she said. "It's moving. It does that, Rule 3. You don't reward it by staring." We stood in the soft cold, pretending the draft that licked our shins was just poor insulation and not a leak from a place that wasn't this. The chain's hook tapped wood, tick, 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 like a spoon on a coffee cup, and then stilled. The silence had weight. Somewhere deep in the warehouse, a pallet settled, the quick staccato of wood complaining. I breathed again. "Sometimes it'll crack the seal a hair," Marla said. "If it does, we stack 2 empties and face the racking until it gets bored." I didn't look up, I said, and heard the child in it. She didn't say good job. She didn't say anything. She just squeezed my vest once and let me go. Continuity. Incident note: 2:17 a.m. PA called Evan in maternal voice, counted to 400. Dock 3 chain oscillation, approximately half-inch. No camera alert. Cams 12 and 28 live. I didn't tell Harlow that the voice knew about the hat I lost when I was 9. I didn't tell anyone that some parts of you are easier to pick up across a distance than others. I went back to F12. I finished the cat litter. And I didn't look up when the ballast above me hummed like a throat, trying not to laugh. The first time you see a forklift's blue safety light turn green, your brain tries to rewire physics to keep its breakfast. The safety spots wobble on the floor like 2 satellites keeping tempo. You learn to trust that shade of blue without thinking. You look for it in your peripheral and move without die. I was dragging a skid of boxed cereal past the F to G intersection when the blue comet coming from the right lane bled into a color that doesn't exist on any safety chart. It didn't flash. It didn't strobe. It shifted, like algae blooming in a pool you didn't know could support life. Rule 4. If the light goes green, get low, cover your ears, do not look at the driver. I swallowed the urge to stare and went down on my forearms, cheek to the cold floor. The concrete smelled like lemon and iron. The green circle slid toward me in silence, like a lake rolling where no lake was. My ears filled with pressure, a cabin depressurizing without the blessing of air. Tino laughed, boots clapping hollowly. "Bro, that's just a bulb." He stepped into the intersection and squinted up at the cab. "Down." I grunted through my sleeve. "Nah, look." He shaded his eyes with a palm and raised his chin, like he was trying to make eye contact with a driver through tinted plastic. I pressed my ear hard against my biceps to drown the sound I could feel coming. The green light washed over my boots. Cold licked my shins like tongue. The forklift edged past, 1 inch, 2, and my ribs vibrated as if a subwoofer had been installed where my heart sat. I didn't look, but I saw the edge of the tire in my peripheral, the rubber casting no shadow, the tiny pebbles embedded in it not existing until they were past me. The green soaked through my vest and pooled in the hollows of my collarbones. Tino's breath hitched. "Hey," he said, and his voice came out damp. The last word drowned under a sound that wasn't a horn, and wasn't a scream, and wasn't anything you hear in daylight. It pressed my palms. It pressed the fillings in my molars. It pressed my eyes until they watered. The forklift rolled by. The pressure lifted. The green went back to blue at the far end of the lane, as if someone had snapped a gel back onto a stage light. I pushed myself up and touched the concrete where my cheek had been. Dry, warmish, normal. Tino stood in the intersection blinking at nothing. Across the back of his vest, from shoulder blade to hip, 4 wet tire tracks striped the fabric, like someone had run dirty fingers over him. He flinched when Marla reached to wipe one. The water wasn't. Her fingers came away dry and cold, and she shook them like they'd touched dry ice. "You okay?" I asked. "Yeah," he said too fast and cleared his throat. His breath fogged, and then didn't. "That wasn't nothing," Marla said. "It was a bulb," he insisted. The set of his mouth said he knew you can't argue with the temperature. We moved the skid. The warehouse settled. Far down aisle B, a pallet-wrapped spool rolled off a shelf and spun itself out, whispering plastic. The PA coughed. "Thought better of it." I tucked my hands into my gloves and felt the green I hadn't seen lingering like a bruise on the inside. "Rule 4 is not a suggestion," Marla said, walking away. Tino rolled his shoulders like a boxer trying to get blood back into something. He stared down the lane where the light had turned back to the only blue this building blessed us with. His eyes shone and then went flat. "No driver," he said, quieter now. Not a boast, more like a receipt he was trying not to keep. Continuity. 258, aisle FG intersection. Forklift safety light, green 4 seconds. Pressure event. No operator visual. Tino contact with wheels. Wet marks. Fabric dry. At dock 3 the chain lifted once, lazily, like a hand scratching a sleep itch. I didn't look at it more than I had to. But in the strip of polished floor between us and it, a line of water dots marked a path that didn't start anywhere and didn't end anywhere. They were the size of toes. They pointed the wrong way. The chain at dock 3 started to hum the way a freezer hums right before the door seal gives. Not a rattle. Music, low and simple, 2 notes rubbing against each other like fingers against a glass rim. We were staging returns for the morning, cardboard whispering against cardboard, when the first hook lifted itself and clinked down again. "Rule 3, Marla said, already moving. 2 empties. Face the racks." We rolled 2 naked pallets and propped them on their sides like shields. The fluorescent tubes above the dock flickered and went steady. Flickered and went steady, like they were practicing breathing. The concrete under my boots felt colder here, a cold inherited from trucks that had once sat and bled refrigerated air into the bone of this place. We planted the pallets. We turned our backs to the door and stared into the racking. Steel uprights, cross braces, the numbers stenciled onto the end caps. The scanner at my hip ticked against my thigh like a nervous bird. Behind us, the chain began to sing. It was metal on metal, but there were intervals in it, little intervals that made the hair along my forearms lift. I could feel the vibration through my vest, through the shallow hollow of my back. The song tightened until it was almost a whine. "Don't turn," Marla said. "Don't help. Don't name it." "I could just," Tino started. "You could just get fired from your life," she said. We stood, eyes on the bolts holding the rack to the floor. I focused on the stamped letters, anchor lock. The kind of industrial poetry you don't notice until the dark needs something to hang on. The song stopped. A sigh came from the dock, not air. Weight. A change in the math of the room. I tasted copper. I breathed through my mouth. A drop of cold landed on the back of my neck like a fingertip. "Don't," Marla whispered. Behind us, wood ticked. Tick, tick, tick. The sound a pallet makes when something crawls over it. The pallets we'd set up as a wall creaked a little under a new load. I watched a spider freeze halfway down its line between 2 shelf holes. Its thread vibrated like a guitar string in a song I couldn't hear. "Is that?" Tino said, and the word got thin like paper. Something large shifted its weight. The air in the dock lane thinned and went sharp. The chain chattered against the latch, in a rhythm that only happens when a hook is lifted by hands you choose not to picture. I felt Tino's boots pivot a degree behind me, not enough to turn, enough to lean, enough to want to look. "Don't," Marla said again, lower. The latch clicked. I heard wood slide and then hit the floor with a slap. Tino made a sound he pretended was a cough and then broke the rule he'd joked about. The turn was small, a head tilt and one eye. "Don't look," I hissed, but he'd already looked. He flinched back so fast his heels squealed across the polished floor. His breath came out as a white flag and then vanished. The pallets groaned as something on the other side pressed them back toward us, the way a drunk presses a cheek against a locked door because the wood is colder than any pillow. "Face the racks," Marla said. "Count." We counted. The numbers stuffed into our mouths like shop rags. The chain sang once more and then went slack with an almost affectionate touch. We held our positions. We held our breath until numbers felt like prayers, and prayers felt like plastic bags. When the cold lifted, it didn't leave. It retreated just enough to let the fluorescent hum back in. We turned as one. The pallets stood where we'd set them. The chain lay limp. Doc 3's rubber bumper had a wet shine like the lip of a mouth. The floor between the pallets and the threshold was marked with droplets, perfectly spaced like footprints walking backward into the dark. Tino pushed a sleeve across his eyes, and when he dropped it, his irises had a film over them, a yellow skim like stale beer left in a clear glass. He blinked. It stayed. "What'd you see?" Marla asked, voice flat. "Nothing," he said. "Just a shadow." It breathed wrong. He slipped his hands into his vest pockets, and when he pulled them out, his fingers left damp prints on the polyester that didn't soak in. Continuity. Doc note 3:22 a.m. Doc 3. 2 pallets placed, faced racking, chain sang approximately 20 seconds. Ambient temperature drop. Tino's ocular discoloration, yellow sheen, noted, no camera alert. Cam 7 looped 056 to 103. I wanted to scrub my neck where the cold had touched me. I wanted to burn the pallets. I wanted the chain to be just a chain. The chain twitched once more, like it had laughed and didn't want us to hear. We resumed the route, and Tino didn't walk in a straight line anymore. He walked like the floor had a magnet under it, and Doc 3 was the only true north. The rest of the night put its hands on my shoulders and pushed. At 3:00 a.m. on the dot, something knocked on the supervisor office window 3 times. Not polite, not playful, professional. The kind of knock you use when you expect to be let in, because that's how it always goes. We were already in there, me, Marla, and Harlow, reviewing the pallet count that didn't like our math. The office is a glass box bolted to the mezzanine like a fish tank someone forgot to feed. Metal desk, old swivel chairs that make your hips feel older. The windows look out over the lanes like you're a lifeguard and everyone else is drowning slow. 3 knocks. The sound came from glass and carried through the frame into bone. "Rule 6, Harlow said without looking up. "Nobody opens. I'm here." She was here. Neon vest, clipboard, gunmetal pen. She kept writing the figure 720 and frowning at it like it had called her a liar in front of her kids. Knock, knock, knock. I tried to pretend glass isn't a skin. The PA sat dead as a fish. The reefers out in the lot breathed steadily. The fluorescent buzz folded itself into a low chord and stayed. Knock, knock, knock. Harlow capped her pen. "We don't engage," she said. "We don't give it an audience." The knocks stopped. Then a voice, clear through the door seam and the glass pane and the steel in the wall. "Harlow," it said, in Harlow's voice, "open up." Every hair on my arms stood. Marla didn't move, but her eyes slid left to catch Harlow's face in the glass. "Don't," Harlow said again, without the word please. "Come on," the outside Harlow said, tone light like she had donuts. "We have to fix the count. We have to fix Doc 3. We have to fix Evan." The last word hit my name like a nail. It doesn't know your last name, Marla whispered. It doesn't need to, Harlow replied. The figure shifted closer to the glass until its breath fogged a shape on the pane, an oval that didn't match where a mouth should be. No shadow under the door, no sound of boots, just that fog oval and the knock 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 like a metronome with 3 notes. I looked at Harlow, at the one inside, at the woman whose pen clicked like a tiny gun. Her vest's reflective strips caught the light and threw it back honest. Outside, the vest caught light and gave nothing. The reflection died on it like water on chalk. Marla's breath shortened. She touched the glass with her index finger in one spot only she could see. A smudge bloomed on our side where no finger had been. Don't touch, Harlow said sharply. Knock, knock, knock. The rhythm didn't falter. The outside, Harlow leaned her forehead to the glass, leaving a pale smear that looked like a thumbprint stretched wrong. We could just... Tell it to go, Tino said from the hall. We all turned. He stood in the doorway, eyes yellowed like cheap ice, the corners of his mouth slick the way you get when you've licked the same spot too many times. He smiled with too many teeth showing for all of the friendliness it carried. How long you been there? Harlow asked. Long enough, he said. His voice was right, but it skated the edges of something else. She asked me to ask you to open up. She said we have to finish the count. His hand slid to the latch. Don't, Harlow said. Diaz. Marla moved faster than a woman with a bad knee should move. She caught Tino's wrist with a grip that made the tendons stand out like cables. He winced. The yellow collapsed for a breath and then bloomed back. Let go, he said, too soft. From outside, Harlow's voice, no, the imitation of it, started to count with us. 1, it said, tapping the glass. 2, tap. 3, tap. We weren't counting. That was the point. It was counting on our behalf. Back away from the door, Harlow said to all of us. Diaz, bring him. We backed. We brought him. We let the glass have the hallway. The knock-tap count went on for a full minute, a minute that lasted a year, and then stopped as if the person doing it had been erased sideways instead of walking away. We stood in the office listening to our heartbeats pretend to be the PA. Good boy. The PA whispered suddenly, in a voice that wasn't a voice, and the lights overhead flickered so hard the room went dark for a slice of a second. When the light came back, there was a handprint on the inside of the glass. 5 fingers of something too long to be mine, too thin to be Tino's, too curious to be Harlow's. Continuity. Office log. 3:00 a.m. Triple knock. Voice mimicking Harlow. Outside vest non-reflective. Internal handprint appearance post-power dip. Tino at threshold. Attempted latch. The handprint didn't fade. It stayed there like a greasy star chart. When I left the office, I could feel it looking. When I lay down that morning, I could feel it on the inside of my eyelids. And when I closed my eyes, the count continued without me. At 4:00, the breakroom TV bled hurricane again, greens and yellows boiling over a coastline nobody in Ohio should see. The caption swore, Toledo, Lima. The weatherman gestured at the Gulf with a smile that didn't touch his eyes. Rule 5 lived on the magnet clip by the fridge like a posted speed limit. We don't touch the remote. We head count on paper. We keep quiet. Tino stared at the map, and then at his cooling coffee. The yellow in his eyes had darkened to the color of old nicotine. This is stupid, he said, and stood. He didn't look at us when he reached up. He looked at the remote like it owed him rent. Don't, Marla said, not turning her head. Her thumb tapped the table once, twice. He clicked. The TV froze on a single frame, an aerial of a highway interchange with nothing moving. The picture sharpened until the lanes were too crisp to be real, pixels tightening like a jaw. The Channel 7 bug in the corner crawled a half-inch to the left, like an insect remembering it has legs. Tino, I said. Put it. He clicked again. The screen went black. For one breath, the whole room felt like the moment between a word and its echo. The fluorescent tubes shivered, the soda machine compressor hiccuped. On the legal pad my name was already there. Evan Hale. Marlos. Diaz. The third line wrote itself in slow blue ballpoint, the pen in nobody's hand. Tino Diaz. What the? He started, and the sound came out of the ceiling. His mouth didn't move. Skin where a mouth should be didn't ripple. No seam. No place for sound to exit. He slapped the flatness, eyes widening. The slap left no mark. The PA said, "What the?" again in his rhythm, like it loved him. Marla put the pad in front of him. "Sign," she said. He took the pen. The letters crawled off his intention and chose a different surname again, Diaz. The ballpoint dug into the paper like a needle. The TV popped back on by itself, now showing a friendly community PSA. The chyron at the bottom read, "Stay safe, Diaz," in the channel's font. "Tino," I said, "write your last name." He pressed the pen harder. The paper dented 3 sheets down. The ink still formed. Diaz. On the TV, the weatherman said, "Good boy, Diaz," with a smile that belonged to no station manager alive. He lunged for the remote again. Marla caught his wrist, the same unyielding grip as before. "Rule 5, she said. "You don't fix the channel fixes you." He froze for 3 long seconds, eyes watering from a pain he couldn't shape with lips he didn't have. The PA spoke for him. "I'm fine." Too loud. Then, smaller from his own throat, a muted grunt. "Count," Marla told me. I counted. The microwave door reflection lagged 2 beats, showing Tino's face smooth and wrong, then easing into catching up as if it felt bad for telling the truth. At 400, the PA sighed off like a fan spin down. Tino's mouth came back the way a fog condenses, first a guess, then a shape. He licked cracked lips. I'm croaked, his own voice this time, and glanced up at the TV like he knew it kept a piece of him. "Finish head count," Marla said. He signed again. The ink still produced. Diaz. Continuity. Break log, 4 o'clock. Channel 7 hurricane. Tino changed channel, violation. Paper auto wrote, "Tino Diaz." PA spoke for Tino, mouth absent approximately 50 to 60 seconds. Restored 407. Surname persistence, Diaz, remains across signatures. As we left, the TV slipped to local radar with the wrong county lines. The PA whispered a test tone. The soda machine coughed. Tino rubbed at his signature like he could smudge the truth back. The blue didn't smear. The building had kept his name on loan and decided to change the terms. And Channel 7 smiled its friendly, unhelpful smile. The punch clock went red at 2:41. It isn't supposed to. Red is for before the night, at the door. Not mid-shift with your body already accounted for. I stopped in the vestibule. The lemon cleaner smell hit the back of my mouth. The screen glowed the color of fresh meat. Evan Hale. Out, 2:18. "The hell?" I said to no one. The printer chirped and spit a slip, still warm. Marla's boots arrived at my shoulder. "Hands off," she warned. Eyes on the screen, like it might bite. "We log it." Harlow keyed the cameras from the office and put cam number 3 up. Grayscale lot. Reefer's breathing. Gate arm asleep. She scrubbed the time bar to 2:17, 2:18, 2:19. My car rolled out of the gate at 2:19. No brake check. No guard wave. The guard shack was empty but lit like someone had just stepped away. The lens caught my plate clean. The driver didn't look up. The driver was me. "I didn't leave," I said. Small in my own throat. "Nobody leaves," Harlow said, too brisk to be comfort. "Systems throw errors, we correct the record." Another slip printed, Evan Hale, in, 2:41. No badge swipe, no beep. It put me back like a book shelved wrong then fixed by a fastidious hand. Why would it? I stopped. The TV in the break room had renamed Tino. The clock now had ideas about me. "Because everything in here keeps books," Marla said low. "And the books like to balance." The screen softened back to green with a tiny heartbeat flicker. Harlow stapled the slips to my time card, neat as a tax return. Her reflection in the Plex panel lagged a hair, then caught up, like it had tripped. "Maintenance if day shift asks," she said. "We keep moving." The PA clicked once, a courteous throat clear. In my own voice, warmed half a degree too much, it said, "Welcome back, Evan." I didn't answer. The printer in the vestibule purred like a cat that had found a lap. Continuity? 218, system out, hail. Cam number 3 shows vehicle exit. 241, in without swipe. Supervisor override logged. PA used hail voice to greet. When I pushed back onto the floor, my legs stuttered on the handoff like I'd been returned to myself, a frame out of sync. By aisle F, I belonged again. Or I was a tidy entry in a ledger that hated white space. The chain at Dock 3 learned our names. That's not an observation you put on paper, but it shapes how you hold your shoulders. At 3:31 a.m., it shook itself awake hard enough to rattle the dock plate. We were there before it could practice its song. Pallets, shields, backs turned. "Don't count out loud," Marla said. "If you count, count with your bones." We faced steel. The fluorescent lines trembled when the chain hit a higher note, a note that made the screws in the fort carriage behind us twang. The air smelled like rain coming in a building with no holes. My breath rasped. The cold had fingers in it now, tapping my vertebrae like keys on a piano someone was learning for the first time. Behind us, wood slid. The pallets scraped a half-inch. The sound went through the soles of my boots. From behind the door that opens onto the outside world and nothing else. A sound like knuckles cracking in wet gloves. "You don't look," Marla said again, voice too even. I fixed my eyes on a bolt head. I read the brand name under my breath. I tasted the grease lifted off the steel by hundreds of hands and a few that worked. The cold leaned in. It was pressing the idea of itself into the cloth between my shoulder blades. My mouth watered stupidly. I swallowed, hard enough to pop my ears. To my left, Marla's boots squeaked. Just a shift of weight, a micro wobble in a knee that had carried too much freight for too many years. Her shoulders tilted. Her chin followed a fraction. She didn't turn, she just almost did. The pressure found that opening. She sucked in a breath like she'd been dunked. Her vest crinkled. A wet slap hit fabric. "Don't move," I said stupidly, because you say it to yourself too. Hands, not hands, pressed her left shoulder. The print they left was water that didn't behave like water. Too clean, too sharp, too articulate. Shh. 5 fingers and a thumb on a body that wore no gloves because gloves are for skin. The damp sank into the reflective strip and stayed there like the logo had been painted on with frost. "Easy," Carlo said from behind us on the radio net, because she refused to be here with her actual hands. "Hold." Marla's breath came out in little broken animal sounds she would never make if any of us could see her face. I watched the marks seep into the union patch on her vest, a blue circle with a handshake, until the ink bled and the hands looked like they were pulling apart. "We're good," I said, to her or to it. "We're good." The pressure withdrew so fast I swayed. The pallet to my right shuddered as if it had been leaned on by something considering jumping and then thinking better of it. The chain chimed a flat rhythm and went still. We held the position until my arches shook, and then for 2 minutes more. When we turned, the dock lane was empty as a photograph. The water handprint on Marla's vest gleamed under the fluorescence like a fresh spill of motor oil. Her jaw was tight enough to bruise itself. She didn't speak. She peeled off the vest and folded it inside out so the hand was covered. She put the folded square under her arm like a book she didn't want to return. Continuity. Dock 3, 3:31 a.m. Pressing event. 5-digit wet print on Diaz vest. Union logo die run. Door remained chained. Pallets shifted approximately half-inch. It didn't take anyone this time. It hadn't wanted to. It wanted to try a grip and remember how. On my way back down F, I noticed the emergency exit signs had turned their little man the wrong way. He wasn't running out, he was running in. We all pretended not to see. Because acknowledging a thing is one way you teach it its name. At 3:58, the forklifts woke in a pack. Their blue spots hit the floor at once and then slid into green in a wave like algae turned tide. The warehouse went submarine. The air went heavy. The buzz rose to a tone I tasted in my fillings. "Down," Marla shouted. The word punched into me hard enough to take my knees. I hit concrete, elbows, forehead, my teeth clicked together. My ears felt hands. Rule 4, Rule 4, Rule 4. I pressed my palms over my ears and it came through anyway. Pressure, not sound. The green pools bled across the lanes and swallowed our boots, and then our shins, and then the idea of our legs. Engines didn't roar. Tires didn't squeal. The flood passed. Something's bumper grazed my shoulder, and I felt my soul walk out of me for a second, because it believed the physical logic. If a thing passes through you, you are not fully here. The cold it left inside was not the cold of night air. It was the cold of a room 100 feet underwater where the water has accepted a bargain. A fork carriage kissed the floor a foot from my nose. The tines slid in front of my eyes. I could see the rust blooms like freckles and the serial number pressed into steel. I could see through them to the floor as if the metal was glass cut to metal's shape. "Stay put," Harlow said in my ear. Her voice, not the PA. In the headset we only use when we have to. "Do not engage." Across the aisle, Tino popped his head up a fraction and the green drenched his face. He blinked, as if he'd been looking at a welding arc. His mouth made a circle and a sound came out of the PA above him, in a rimshot laugh. "Down," Marla barked. He went flat, cheeks smearing some damp we couldn't see. The flood thinned. The lights came back the right color. The warehouses in other universes where they don't run night shifts winked at me through my own. I pushed myself up, and the world lagged for a second, like my eyes had found the buffer. I didn't hear the PA at first. I felt it, my own voice in my own skull, coming from an angle that wasn't any of the angles the room owns. "Evan," it said in my tenor. And I almost answered, just from reflex. The reflex you have when someone calls your name in the tone you use to talk to yourself. "I hear you," my voice said. "Look up." I didn't. I stared at the concrete until the pox in it were a map. I ran my fingertips over the floor to prove it was there. "Look up," the voice coaxed. "Show me your eyes." It knew Rule 2. It wanted me to break it. I counted. I had no right number for this hour. I counted anyway. The pressure lifted. The green slid away, back to its assigned blue. Far down aisle B, one light stayed green a beat too long, then snapped to blue with a petulant little click, like a kid told no. I stood on legs that belonged. The warehouse put itself back together around me. Labels, squeaks, the drip of whatever condensation idea had been invented for. I checked my shoulder where the bumper had slid through. The fabric was dry. My skin was not gooseflesh because that would have been kind. It was smooth and cool as if someone had ironed it from the inside. Tino laughed again with the PA's mouth and then with his own. It echoed. He clapped a hand over his lips. It still echoed. Continuous event, 358 to 402. Fleet-wide green, pressure event. At least 6 units, no visible operators. Minor through-body contact, Hale's shoulder. PA spoke in Hale's voice, reverted to blue at 402. The day crew would come in at 6 and the building would pretend to be a distribution center again. We had an hour to survive the idea that the building wasn't that anymore and never had been. I stacked cereal like I was drowning in it, and the smell of cardboard was the surface. The knock came at 3 o'clock again because clocks are just suggestions here. 3 professional taps. The office glass vibrated a polite amount. We had learned the posture for this. Ignore. Count inside. Do not unlock. I was in the office with Harlow, the inside Harlow, the one who smelled like coffee and hand soap. The laminate rules lay on the desk like a Bible you leave open because closing it feels like a dare. Tino hovered in the doorway, his yellowed eyes peeled thin like eggshell. "Rule 6, Harlow said, and then didn't say anything else because the other Harlow had started. "Let me in," outside Harlow said. "We have to fix the head count." Her vest in the hallway glass didn't reflect. Her hair in the reflection didn't move even when she tilted her head. The fluorescent light overhead drew a stripe across her cheek that didn't curve with her cheek. It ran straight, as if projected on paper. Inside, Harlow didn't look up. She signed a sheet like she was writing a permission slip for a field trip. Her reflection in the interior window ran a half-second late and then caught up. The delay so small you could pretend you'd imagined it if you were someone who needed to keep a job. Tino's hand drifted, the way a hand drifts when it's attached to a person whose mouth has been borrowed. It kissed the latch. "Don't," I said, stepping in to block without making it a tackle. He smiled like I'd made an inside joke with him. His teeth looked varnished. Outside, Harlow giggled. It was a sound I would not have guessed Harlow could make in this or any life. It bent itself through the crack around the door and poked me in the ear. "Hail," the giggle voice said. "Good boy." I flinched because the PA had said that to me, and things that line up are either coincidence or structure, and we were not in the realm of coincidence. I glanced at the glass panel that lets the office see the warehouse below. A nice view, if you're someone who likes to watch work from a clean chair. In the glass I saw the three of us. 4 of us, counting the outside Harlow. 5, if you include the idea of the building counting 2. Inside Harlow didn't reflect. The pane showed her vest on the chair. It showed her clipboard. There was a her-shaped absence standing where she stood. The fluorescent stripe crossed an empty where a person should be. "Marla," I said, except she wasn't here. She was in aisle C, fixing a wrap job with a care your hands only give when you're trying not to touch a thing too hard. I swallowed. "Harlow." She looked up, finally. Her eyes were the color of audit. "What? You don't reflect." Her face barely moved. The line of her mouth stayed a line. She shifted her weight until her vest squeaked. The glass showed the squeak. It didn't show her. "Oh," she said, calm like a cat at a vet. She looked over my shoulder at the outside Harlow. "You can leave now," she told it. Outside Harlow smiled with all her gums. I was just going to say the same thing. Something small in me broke a little, like a tooth chip you only notice when your tongue finds it. I moved for the latch again, less careful now. Tino braced his palm on it too. The pressure of his hand too cool by a degree I didn't know how to measure. "Don't open," inside Harlow said, still in that calm voice. "Diaz will be back. We'll ride this out." Outside, Harlow tapped the glass 3 times in a pattern that matched the PA's heartbeat tone. The overhead lights fluttered. The office dimmed, then brightened. When it brightened, there were 2 reflective vests visible in the outside glass. One with stripes, one without. Both smiled. One had a mouth that didn't line up with the smile. Inside, Harlow tilted her head and her mouth said, in the PA's classroom calm, "Good boy." The sound didn't come from the ceiling tile. It came from her throat, from her chest, from a speaker installed where no speaker should go. She blinked slowly. When she opened her eyes, the reflective strips on her vest caught the light again and gave it back. The reflection in the office window caught up and showed her the way glass should show a person. Tino took his hand off the latch like it had stung him. Outside, Harlow's smile slid down her face like a sticker losing its stick. She turned, not like a person turns, more like a page being turned by the wrong corner, and walked away without footsteps. Continuity. Office log, 3:00 a.m. Dual Harlow manifestation. Inside reflection absent for approximately 15 seconds. PA phrase "good boy" produced vocally by Harlow. Outside vest, non-reflective. No door open. We stood in the hum. The building had said something through Harlow, and whatever said it had decided that was sufficient for now. I caught my breath and realized I was counting again. Not to 400. To how many of us were left. I parked under the same dying sodium lamp and watched 1107 crawl toward me like a tide that always takes the same stairs. Dome light on, warm yellow. Rule 1 quiet in my pocket like a talisman that knows its limits. Inside, the vestibule tasted like filtered HVAC and lemon. The punch clock read my badge and without waiting printed in 1107 and immediately on the same breath, out 1108. 2 slips kissed and separated like you'd practiced the trick enough to show friends. The warehouse held its breath. Fluorescents hummed in their cages. The PA clicked but didn't pick a voice yet. I checked the office. The glass box sat lit and empty, clipboard on the desk, Harlow's vest on the chair. No Harlow in the room, no Harlow in the reflection. The reflective strips on the vest gleamed. The glass returned the room minus the person who should bend it. "Marla?" I said on the radio. 1 click came back. Then a thermal of cold ran up my arm like a sleeve you can't take off. Down at Dock 3, the chain lay pretty on the latch like jewelry on a body. An inch of open mouth waited, no draft, just possibility. 2 empties. Pallets on edge. Back to the door, face the racking, numbers in the bones. Rule 3, I said to myself, because speaking it out loud makes the floor feel more solid. "Evan," the PA said, and for the first time, it didn't use my voice or my mother's or Harlow's. It used a voice built from Channel 7, from the weatherman's pleasant vowels and the admonition every PSA uses when it sells safety. "Evan Diaz," it said. The name stuck. It fit my ears like a wrong shoe. I flinched. "No," I said. The building paused, amused. The legal pad in the break room, though I wasn't there to see it, wrote Head Kale, Diaz, Diaz in steady strokes, no handmade. "Face the racks," Marla said in my ear, and her channel carried a hollow. The space behind her voice had the soft-socked acoustics of no one. "Don't turn, Evan. Count." "I'm counting," I lied. The pallets brushed my calves, cold seeped boneward. The inch became 2. The dock bumpers creaked like something leaned affectionate. The fluorescent pitch dropped half a tone. The reefers outside hit a harmony that made the concrete a diaphragm. From the vestibule, the printer chattered. Out 333, Marla Diaz sliced itself into being, though the badge hadn't been near it. My radio clicked twice, then 3 times, then dead air. I said her name and it didn't carry. The office glass held the absence of Harlow like a negative space you could fall into. "Evan." Channel 7 purred through the PA. "Good boy. Check the seal." I turned because the building had been renaming me in little strokes and I wanted to look the clerk in the eye. Dock 3 was open to a clean 2 inches now. Black that wasn't black. Texture like plowed field seen at night from a truck cab. Rows that went the wrong direction under stars you couldn't swear you knew. Footprints bloomed on the concrete, my size. Wet without water. They walked up the racking, toes toward the fluorescent coffin, and disappeared into the place light pretends not to go. My throat closed around the taste of pennies and lemon and paper dust. Behind me, somewhere inside the building, a laugh started and couldn't find its owner. The PA gave it a home. I raised the radio. "If I talk through the ceiling, don't believe it," I said, and the PA answered, "If I talk through the ceiling, don't believe it," half a second ahead like it had the script. The chain thrummed a chord. The pallets slid an inch forward on their own, eager kids. The dock plate rattled like a foil pan. "Face the racks," Marla had said, and where her hand had pressed my shoulder last night, the skin remembered a cold palm. I turned back, pressed my forehead to steel. Numbers in the marrow. Behind me, something considerate closed the gap a fraction to help, then opened it again to see if I'd notice. I didn't. I counted. The PA tested names like outfits. Evan Diaz, Diaz. It tried Harlow, and the sound didn't fit the rafters. It tried Marla, and the fluorescent hum dipped as if paying respect. The printer in the vestibule cut another slip. 334 in the same calm font you used to tell a family the schedule changed. Good boy, the PA murmured, not mocking, not kind, only exact. Turn. Turn. I didn't. Not this time because the building wanted it. I finished the count. At 400, the chain laid itself down. The gap flattened to rubber on metal. The cold stayed where cold likes to live. The racking pressed its paint into my skin and left a grid. I stepped back. The office glass reflected me, and not me, the mouth on time, the eyes on delay, then settled into honesty. The vest on the chair gleamed. The chair had no owner. I walked to the vestibule. The clock waited with 2 slips, in 11:07 and out 11:08. The tray below the printer held out 3:33. Marlet. Nene 3:34 like fresh tickets at a ride that never stops. The PA breathed my new name once, softly. Evan Diaz. A perfect call. A perfect answer ready on my tongue if I gave it. Continuity 11:07, in, auto out 11:08. Dock 3 open 2 inches, footprints hail size on vertical racking. PA used channel 7 cadence, addressed as Evan Diaz. 3:33 out auto print without swipe. 3:34 supervisor status NA. I stood under the dome light of my car and watched the cab fill with that good dumb yellow. It made a face out of my face that belonged to a person with one name. Inside the warehouse, the printer purred like a content thing. The reefers harmonized. The fluorescent buzz stitched itself into the ceiling. When the PA said my name, I answered. I answered the one it had chosen.
Comment your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe to Dr. Noctis for more horror stories from the dark.